friend just calls me on a Monday morning and says, "Have you heard?" And I'm like, "Heard what?" And he was like, "I'll call you back." His death was quite tough, but I didn't process it. Different stages of grief that I didn't process, but until about 3 years ago when my mental health was really affected.
If you can paint a picture of what was happening.
Anxiety, stress levels, and then it affects your physical health. I did seek therapy as well.
And it helped you.
Not all therapy is helpful. There are definitely biases. If you don't want to save a life, why would you work in a profession that is geared towards saving lives?
What's your definition of saving a life?
Saving a life is, mental health. People do commit suicide eventually if they can't come to terms.
Are you saying that the therapist could possibly be responsible if someone decides, right, that's it, I'm taking my own life now?
Well, let's not go into that.
Hey guys, welcome back to Grief Uncensored. Today I have Andrea and I also have Sheun. How are you doing, Sheun?
Very well, thank you.
Great stuff. Andrea, could you kindly tell us a bit about your profession and what you do?
Yes, I can. My name is Andrea. I'm a counsellor stroke coach. I'm what you call an integrative counsellor, which means I work with more than one approach.
Yeah.
I'm also a bereavement counsellor.
Oh, amazing.
And I'm also a mental health first aider.
So happy to have you.
Pleasure to be here.
So honored. Yeah, so the topic for today is on how to navigate therapy. And does therapy work for you? And yeah, so today, Sheun, you're on my podcast today. How you feeling? How you doing?
Feeling good.
Feeling great?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I just wanted to talk to you about your grief. If you can tell us a little bit about your experience with grief and how you've been.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think grief is such we don't talk about it enough. Coming from where I come from Nigeria, I didn't have a lot of experience around this sort of discussions for a long time.
Yeah.
And it was as I, went through life and experienced grief in different forms that I started to understand the subject to the broader perspective. So my understanding around grief, and Andrea will probably be better at explaining this, is that grief comes in different shapes and forms, right? You could lose someone, you could lose an opportunity, you could lose a relationship, you could lose anything, and you sort of have that grief. You grieve that situation as it were.
Yeah.
But prior to my different life experiences, I only knew of loss of life as grief. I never thought about anything else related to grief in those areas that I've touched on. But yeah, I don't know if I've done it justice, but Andrea will probably do better.
Oh no, so I was saying, when you say loss of life, I don't know what you mean by that.
Like when someone you love dies. Right?
Oh yeah, so yeah.
Or are we talking about grief in that context?
Yeah, so I was asking who you lost. Like, tell us about your.
Okay. Well, I think the question will probably be better to I think we all lose someone through life, right? I was a child, and I remember losing friends. Then I was a teenager, remember losing, family members. So you kind of lose people at different points in life, right?
Yeah. Okay, so who is the closest person you've lost?
Oh, that's a very tough question. I've had quite a number of people who are close to me that I've lost over time. My initial memory of someone wasn't too close, so you wouldn't call it close. It was just a friend. But I remember that particular situation very, very well. We always went to the same we lived around the same area, we played together, and his death was quite tough.
So that's the closest loss you've had? Is that the one? I mean, actually not closest, I mean the most impactful.
It's kind of tough for me to put that, because I can't rate I can't rate, this person's the closest, because my mom's still alive, my dad's still alive.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of tough to then say,
Can't measure grief at all.
You can't.
There's no way you can do that. Grief for people experience it in different ways. Everyone's different how they handle grief. Like you quite rightly say, grief comes in different forms. Not just someone losing their life, but it could be if you've lost a home, or you've lost even something precious, a piece of jewelry, or something that had sentimental value. This is all contributes to being a loss, but people don't actually realise that. It's just more. It's kind of thinking a little bit more outside the box when it comes to grief. But it's not just about the loss of life, it's about lots of other things. How people view it is another matter.
Okay.
Because some people may think, it's like you've lost your key.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But, that means somebody, it's massive to somebody. It's like someone losing a pet. Now, okay, if you don't have a pet, you wouldn't understand the grief that people go through if they have a pet. And some people are on their own, they're single, and the pet is all their companionship they've got. So when that pet dies, it's massive for some people. So they can't, it's like losing a physical human being.
Yeah.
And they go through the same grieving process of losing that animal, or, So it's grief takes just different forms for a lot of different people.
Yeah. Okay, so with your grief, did it affect you mentally, like your mental health?
I think depending on, like, thinking back, right? So if I talk about my friend as a childhood, right? I was impacted, but I wasn't impacted, if that makes sense. Like I kind of felt sad that I'd lost him, right? But it kind of just.
How long was this? If you don't.
I was probably about 10 or 11.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
But I didn't process it. Let me put it that way, use the psychological terms that, psychologists use. I didn't process it, right? And then lost my grand aunt who raised me back in Nigeria. Forget the accent. I was raised in Nigeria, so I can switch my accent anytime. So
all right, there wasn't like, well, we're gonna talk about Nigeria, so maybe you can use that then.
Yeah, so I can throw in the H factor very well.
Yes.
But anyway, she raised me, right? And I remember her loss as well. But I didn't process it.
Okay.
Right. So there are different stages of grief that I didn't process, but until probably about 3 years ago, when then my mental health was really affected. That's when I started understanding around grief. Then I started going back memory lane to sort of think, okay, when did that grief happen? What did that happen? And, you kind of read about grief and processing. And I'm like, actually, did I really process that one that happened at 10? Did I process the grand aunt? Did I process? So it became like that. Then during COVID, I lost a very, very close friend of mine. I mean, I think that was sort of like the icing on the cake for me, because we had chatted the Saturday. He had asked me to get him some stuff. And then a friend just calls me on a Monday morning and says, have you heard? And I'm like, heard what? And he was like, okay, I'll call you back. And I remember categorically going into the office, being in the office, and I sat down on the floor because I just couldn't process it, because he was my best man in my previous marriage. I mean, no, not my best man. He was one of the guys on the groomsmen. He was a very close friend of mine. Okay. So that was now that sort of hit for me.
Okay, so and you mentioned your mental health. Do you mind sharing, or is that?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about your mental health you mentioned. And then now that you lost someone recently, which is not quite long, like how are you dealing with that? Or how did you deal with that, and how are you dealing with that now? So how many questions is that? That's like 3 in 1. So let's start with which one? Because which one should we start? Andreas, what are you curious to? But can you ask him a question, please?
Well, I think as far as the person that you lost, what was it? What was it? I know you said you didn't process it, but what was how did you navigate yourself around the fact that you hadn't processed that feeling of grief?
Okay. That's actually a good question.
See?
Yeah. See, that's why she's the psychologist and you're not.
I'm not. Counselor.
Oh, counsellor.
Yeah.
Counsellor, correct.
Yeah. Counselor. What's the difference? We'll get into that later.
So how did I process it when it happened? I think because I was already at a low point, I had no choice but to actually process this particular one. Right. If I wasn't, perhaps I would have done what I usually did, which was just move on with life, which I think a lot of people do anyway. But because I was already at a low point, I felt there's no lower you're going to get at this point. So it's better you process this. So I started going down memory lane about our relationship and read a little bit more. And I was already sort of playing with the idea of the mental health space at the time anyway. So it was like, well, if you are going to put out this solution, this technology that helps people process and get better mental health support, then practice what you preach. So at that point, I started writing down some of our experiences together, but more importantly, just remind myself of, the kind of friendship that we had and hold on to the good memories. So that's how I processed that particular one.
Yeah, that's actually a good way.
That's a good way. Okay, so you talked about your mental health. Do you want to elaborate a little bit about that?
Okay, so my mental health for me was something that I didn't really think about before that, right? So COVID happened and, everyone was shut down. I don't know if all you have to do is Google me, right? I'm a very social butterfly. And, I had a lot of relationships at the time. So coming into COVID, I think everyone was dealing with, that kind of stuff. Yeah. But I don't know if anyone else can relate, but for extroverts, it was probably harder, right? At least for me, it was, right? So COVID happened, that was a trigger point, and then different triggers just started layering, and I just shut out literally completely every cognitive function you could think of, emotional, logical, everything was gone. And it was at that point that I had to start building back up.
What do you mean by shutdown?
I think when mental health is typically defined as your ability to regulate your emotions, right? Or at least one of it. One part of it is that, okay, you can regulate how you feel at any point. But Andrea can always correct me, right?
Yeah.
So at that point, I couldn't. I just couldn't, sort of control how I felt at any point in time. So that was how I describe complete shutdown. Because if you, sometimes we have bad days, right?
Yes, of course.
And then you wake up the next day, you go out with friends, you get a drink or whatever it is, and you find. But it would just, I was at a point where I just couldn't regulate it, or whether I slept or woke up completely. Yeah, that's what I meant by shutdown.
If you don't mind, briefly, if you can paint a picture of what was happening, examples. Is that it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think it was just all the symptoms that you get with mental health issues, right? Anxiety, stress levels, and then it affects your physical health, and you get stressed over that physical health, and just the different aspects of it. So it'll probably take us about 2 hours to go through that.
So how did you come out of that? What helped you?
different things. But I sort of coined it down to what I call the REST model. And that's what, shameful plug.
Rest model.
That's what I'm using to build a mental well-being platform that would aim to help people. And that REST model is very simple. It's what clinical therapists will probably already know. It's WREST. It's a acronym.
Oh, I thought it was REST.
No, WREST.
Okay.
Which is writing, reading, exercise, sleep, and therapy.
Interesting.
It makes it easier for you to remember.
Say that again, slowly.
Writing, reading, exercise, and sleep, and therapy.
Say that one more time.
Writing, reading, or relearning.
Okay.
Exercise, sleep, and therapy.
That's interesting. So I'm very interested in the sleep part, because exercising I'm good at. I know that. So how were you able to sleep, or how did you sleep?
There are different, sort of suggestions out there with how to, better manage your sleep.
But what helped you?
But I think the first part for me is, measuring it, right?
Okay.
Because I'm not an expert, so I can't tell you all the different techniques to help you better sleep and the rest of it. And there's more than enough information on the internet for that. But I think what uniquely helped me was measuring my sleep, right? Which prior to that, I didn't really measure.
How did you measure your sleep?
The digital watch, just making sure that you track your sleep.
Interesting. Okay.
What was you tracking, like the duration of that, how long you slept for?
Yes, so that was one part. And then also there are different metrics on your watch that if you kind of go into the app, you're able to see sort of things around stress levels, and then you can relate that to how much time you slept, in a sense. So for days when I had 7 hours of sleep, for example, I kind of had an idea of, actually there might be a correlation here.
Okay, so I'm interested as a man and expressing your emotions. Is that hard for you? And when you had the mental health, would I call it a breakdown?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. As a man, were you able to communicate that? Did you seek counseling? Did you talk to your friends, family?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I used that REST model. Otherwise, I wouldn't even be proposing it.
Okay.
Right. As I like to say, I'm the first test subject with, what I'm building.
Okay.
So every part of that acronym, I lived it. So the T part means therapy. So I did seek therapy as well.
Okay. And it helped you?
Yeah.
Okay.
The REST model helps.
Yeah. Well, you're not elaborating. Bloody hell. Yes, I know. But I mean, if you give one example of each, that can benefit me. Because
I'm going to just say that if you can, for each acronym, if you could just say what you did.
Yeah, give example. Yeah.
I really if I did read
Yeah.
like that's based on blah, blah, blah.
Okay. So to answer your question, or to go into a bit more detail, you're going to have to pay me for consultation. Because I'm a businessman, so
Sure.
I wouldn't go into the detail. But if you picture the REST model, right, it's writing helps generally. So if you write down your thoughts, your feelings, for example, that's a good place to start. And that can be associated with processing. One of the ways you process your thoughts is by writing. And then reading, again, you just look for the right information that is needful at that point in time with whatever you're struggling. Now, I can go into all the different formats and how you do it better and, you improve that. But like I said, you pay me for that. Exercise, again, it does help. Sleep, I've mentioned that about tracking. And then the therapy part, that's a bit more controversial. I get a bit more controversial around the therapy because not all therapy is helpful in certain situations. There are definitely biases that could worsen your situation, but that's my controversial stuff. So maybe that might help you get some likes on social media, but you get my point. But it's, you follow that.
Give me an example of good and bad therapy.
The word I use, bias.
Bias.
Right? Yes. Right. For a therapist is bias, right? And which any therapist can be biased. I am biased.
Have you experienced?
You can all be biased. Oh yeah, absolutely. So I'm biased. You know, I have my own biases. You have yours. Everyone does. So what then happens is, if you are going through a particular situation where the therapist does not fully understand the context of your culture, does not understand the full context of your life as a general, right? And just says, well, your behavior is because you're a man, for example. That's just a gender-based bias, right? It's because you're a man. But not all men are the same. Same thing for women, right? If I'm a male therapist and I say, all women are emotional, right? That's a bias I already have. If I'm listening to you, right? Or acts like I'm listening to you, if I'm already having that bias, I might say you're the problem. But I wouldn't say it because I, you know, as my practice, I'm not allowed to say that, but I can use techniques that worsens that without actually relating that. And you just go on social media, you see some of those funny videos around therapy sessions, and that would help you understand what I mean in general. But that's just me being controversial.
You know, I agree. I think that to a certain degree, I agree with some of those points that, you know, not every therapist is the same. We can't generalize either. Do we know that all men are one way or all women are emotional? No, you don't, because you don't know every woman in the world. And there is the unconscious bias, which, you know, that's why it's unconscious, because many people do it. So, I guess I can't speak for all therapists, but I can only speak for myself. But I'm sure people have experienced their own. And if you know, when you're talking about culture, you might find people that would draw more to a counsellor from their own background because they feel that there's less explanation. So if you had a counsellor who had a Nigerian background or even a Ghanaian background, you think, actually, yeah, okay, I could go with that because they often have to explain everything about my culture. And I feel a bit more comfortable because I've got someone that looks similar to me, as far as maybe complexion, and they feel more comfortable. And that is entirely their prerogative if that's what they choose. Is it always readily available? At one point in counselling out, I believe that it wasn't always accessible to have someone of your own background. But I think times are changing now, where I think we're a bit more culturally sensitive to people's needs and people of colour and so on and so forth.
And if it's okay, Eloho.
Yes, of course. It's not
okay.
asking you questions.
Okay.
Ask questions. Yes.
So I think there's another part when we, you know, look at. It's not so much about if the therapist looks like you, right? Because look can be deceiving, right? You know, somebody might not look like you, but understand your culture.
Oh yes.
So I think it's beyond look, and it's much more around empathy. And this is a thing I did say to my psychologist, right? That there's always a missing line, and that's empathy. That I find that when we start to have discussions around therapy, looks, and even in the context of any other thing else, right? Empathy is always that missing thing, in my view, that can tilt it over. Because, like I said, looks can be deceiving. I could look like this and not think like the culture. Vice versa, right? So, but that's a bit more nuanced, and it makes it a bit more complex to have those sort of discussions.
I get that. I do get that, what you're saying. But, you know, you have to think about the people that are coming in. You've got people from different ages that are very set in their ways. And regardless of whether that person could be of a different background and would totally understand and be very empathetic with your situation and want to know about your background, know about your culture. There are people that won't budge on that. But they just don't want to change. They want to be in their comfort zone. So that can make it a little bit difficult. And then you also have to think about people who don't want to seek counselling because it's their background won't allow it. Oh no, we keep it within the family. And there's lots of cultures like that says no, don't take that outside. You keep it here. So there's always those different things. But when they do reach out, they're looking for something specific because it's already a massive step to reach out in the first place. So if I am going to reach out, I'm going to reach out for someone who looks like me or similarly to me. So, but I do understand what you're saying. But does everyone have natural empathy? No.
Yeah. And I agree with that. You know, I just think with the profession, that should be one of your criteria, and that could be an organization.
I agree.
Or educational conversation, right? Because why would you, if you don't want to save a life, why would you work in a profession that is geared towards saving lives, right? So it's sort of counterintuitive to be in the profession and not have empathy, in my view. Oh yeah, saving a life is, mental health. People do commit suicide eventually if they can't come to terms.
Are you saying that the therapist could possibly be responsible for that happening? Do they play a part in it if someone decides, right, that's it, I'm taking my own life now?
Well, let's not go into that.